We have a great time.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. It's great to see you. We're so happy you're here for No Straight Paths to Data Careers, the panel discussion. We're the DataPride LGBTQ plus Tableau user group. We're a virtual user group with the intent of creating community within the Tableau community for the LGBTQ plus community and allies to highlight and elevate and bring us all together. We have the virtual group, but we also have the new New York-based group. So if you're in the New York City area, you might want to connect with them to join in on their events. They just had their first event earlier this week. So we're really excited for them. I just put their links in the chat. Your DataPride leads are Lawrence Durbin, Kyle Massey, and me, Sarah Carr. We're so happy you're here. So we have our career panel today. Working in data brings us all together, but we might not have started out on the same path, but it's where we've landed, and we can learn from each other, learn from each other's stories and where they come from. Everyone is unique and their career path is unique. So we can learn about where each other comes from and it can help us reflect on our career paths as well. We have a great panel for you, four amazing members of the Tableau community who are passionate about data careers, and we're so grateful for them for sharing their stories, sharing their time. Brandi Beals, Elisa Davis, Virginia Moench, and Kevin Wee. So if you have questions during the presentation, you can put those into the Q&A and put those into the chat. And we'll get to those as well. And to our panelists, thank you for all you do. Thank you for being here. And I was thinking we'd just kind of go down the line and with introductions to start with. So starting with Brandi, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, your name, pronouns, where you're joining us from, and the type of work you do now?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. My name is Brandi Beals. I use she, her pronouns. I'm from Wisconsin. Generally, I live currently in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I am currently the manager of a data analytics team for an asset management firm, so financial services. But I think more specifically, I'm in IT. So, and I think this is, I've learned it's kind of an interesting distinction because data analytics can live in all sorts of different parts of an organization. The fact that I'm in IT, I lead a technical team whose, our focus is to actually implement and support and administer all sorts of different data analytical tools and teach and serve the entire organization. So it's very much more on like the IT administrative side, focusing on like Tableau implementations and upgrades and educating other people to learn how to use Tableau and self-serve. So that's where I spend my time.
Thank you. Elisa?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Elisa Davis. I currently work for a subcontractor on a NASA contract. So my email is at nasa.gov, which is pretty exciting. This is a relatively new position. I started it about a month ago, and I have almost enough security clearance to actually do my job. So it's been, a nice month of cross training and learning new tools and onboarding. Kind of the project that I'm working on is sort of budget, cost transparency, trying to understand what's spent on what, which is interesting work that is similar to and very different from, we'll get into background later, she, her, and so my work is a combination of I'm still a senior individual contributor. I help out with the data engineering side of things and am much more useful on that than I ever anticipated becoming. I came into Tableau through the business analyst side of things, kind of was a super user, started putting together dashboards. I've always been interested in how can we use the information that we have to answer the questions that we have and solve the problems that we have. That's come in lots of different forms over the course of my career. And then kind of being a sort of obligate visual thinker when I got access to Tableau and was like, wait, I can turn spreadsheets into pictures. That really unlocked the next step of my career. So that's the work that I'm doing now, learning all tricks and getting my feet wet with a couple of different visualization tools.
Great, thank you so much. Virginia or Ginny?
Yeah, hi, I'm Virginia. I do go by Ginny, and my pronouns are she, her. I am joining from Western North Carolina in the foothills, just below Boone and Appalachian State University, which is where I work. I work as an enrollment management BI analyst, so I spend most of my days building dashboards that track point-in-time enrollment, daily retention rates. I track a lot of graduation-related, like number of applications and number of graduates to make sure that students are staying on track to graduate on time. I look at a lot of course data and their grades, how they're performing, and I guess that's kind of what I do in a nutshell, but I love working in higher education.
Great, thank you. Kevin?
Well, hello everyone. I am Kevin, and if we have any Mandarin-speaking audience today or watching the video recording later, it's Huang Kewen. That's my name in Mandarin, and I use the he/him pronouns. And I am calling in from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm right in downtown, looking at Lake Michigan right now, like in my 12th floor apartment. I am at Chicago Financial Service. I've been a BI analyst in the company for slightly over 3 years. Just recently promoted from senior to lead position. Very fortunate about it. And my day-to-day work involves creating or revising BI interface for our internal business partners. Basically, if anyone wants to know how the company is doing, they will reach out to us and they're like, oh, we've been doing this calculation for months, and then we don't want to spend like too much time on it. We want to automatically generating a report to tell us how the company is doing. They reach out to us, we talk, collaborate, and come up with a dashboard, a report, or an email that they will receive on a regular basis. I'm also part of the teaching force in the company where we provide Tableau training service and consulting times to our internal analysts. So that's my job.
Thank you so much. So many different fields represented. Can you tell us about what your career path has been like? What kind of work have you done before your current position? Brandi, could we start with you?
Absolutely. Well, I guess for me, I think about maybe my degree in undergrad. I actually was really interested in art, but I knew that wouldn't pay the bills. So I got a second degree in economics as well, and found that I was pretty interested in economic development. I kind of thought that's what I wanted to do. But you know what? I graduated college in 2009 during the Great Recession. So jobs were kind of hard to come by at that time. I was just lucky to really get a job. So I actually started working at Banana Republic. I went in early and stocked the shelves with stuff. And then also I canvassed. Basically, I went door to door, or I kind of stood out on the public streets, kind of asking if people had time to support gay rights or to support the environment. And I asked for donations. So it was a brutal job. It made every other job seem easier. But I think pretty quickly I was looking for other things to do and ended up landing a job as a research associate at an economic development firm. So it actually kind of worked out really well. That's kind of what I thought I wanted to do. And by the way, I got the job because of somebody I knew through my university days. So I got that job, and I was a research associate. And I learned pretty quickly that I wasn't actually interested in what economic development meant in a day-to-day kind of sense. Wasn't really what I kind of thought it was going to be. What I did learn, though, is that working in Excel, I felt like it was really cool. One of the things they had me do was put together an annual report with like charts and graphs, and I realized that was really interesting. And so when I was looking for my next role, I knew I wanted to do something related to that. So I ended up, at the time, I was also kind of moving to a different city. So I was just looking for any data job, and I ended up getting a job as a contract analyst at a pharmaceutical data company, which it didn't really work a lot with data. It was more about analyzing these like pharmaceutical manufacturing contracts. But it was a foot in the door. And after about 6 months, I heard about a team called the analytics team. And I was like, this sounds right up my alley. And so I ended up applying for that internal position and getting that. And that's when I learned Tableau. That's when I got introduced to Tableau about 13 years ago now. And kind of I became an application specialist. So I specialized in Tableau, and I started attending user group meetings, and that's where I met somebody at the Tableau user group here in Milwaukee. And she actually introduced me to the job I have now. And I've been at that company now for 10 years. So I don't know, I guess that's kind of the path. It's a bit of, some things felt like they made perfect sense. And in retrospect, it's, I don't know, it's definitely a winding path and I don't know, getting a lot of help along the way for sure.
I love it. And you kind of find things you like along the way. So
exactly. Well, like what you like and what you don't like. I think you have to explore both things, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For sure. Elisa?
Yeah, so I will give you the short version of my career synopsis, which is that I have a BA in math from Smith College, a master's degree in public administration from Syracuse, and now I'm working on a budget analysis project doing data analysis and visualization for NASA. That sounds really direct, right? I graduated with a math degree, and I had no idea what I wanted to do with it. It was 2006. I knew that I didn't want to go to Wall Street. In fact, I thought that I wanted to be a book editor and actually landed an internship at a literary agency that I ultimately passed on to go be an editor for Knowles, this outdoor leadership school in Wyoming. The recession was in 2008, and I had bounced around trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life for just long enough that I was not sitting in a real job when the stock market crashed. So I spent a lot of time bouncing back and forth between seasonal outdoor ed jobs, working at Starbucks. I make a mean cappuccino. I can tell you from the sound of steaming milk whether it's going to be like a good latte or not. A fellow barista represent. I'm actually kind of grateful that I learned a lot about being supervised and working with a team and being a good collaborator in that sort of very low stakes environment, because I would not want to supervise 23-year-old me. I had a lot of ideas and not a lot of sort of awareness of when and how to bring up suggestions or the broader context of why things might be good enough the way that they were, or sort of who to raise suggestions to in a way that they could be heard and actioned on instead of making people feel defensive and shut down. So I learned a ton kicking around, and then went back to grad school after that period, did a master's degree in public administration, which I loved. There was a lot of theme of nonprofit work through my early career, and mission-driven work was something that was easy for me to get excited about. So I did grad school, did some stats, loved it, had enough econ background to test out of that, and had plenty of space for electives. And so going into nonprofit work, the most data-oriented aspect of that is fundraising. So I spent the next chapter of my career in fundraising, first in annual giving, where I did a lot of program analysis and suggested that we do internal annual reporting on the program and put it together with lots of like, what did we do? How did it go? What went well? What could be better? It brought it all to my boss, who was like, this is great. This is very unusual. And I was like, cool. So went from there to higher ed, where I did a job called prospect research, which is basically a combination of turning LinkedIn profiles into paragraphs and data mining. And that's where I had the little sparkly star icon for Tableau on my computer for the first time. One of these situations where, we'd had Tableau for a while, but no one in IT had the bandwidth to work with the fundraisers to develop the reports that they needed. And they were like, well, maybe prospect research can do it. And so I did. Fell in love with Tableau. After a few years, wanted to make Tableau more of my job. So I started working on a public profile, went to conference one year, self-funded, and took vacation to go and network. One of the people I met was Kevin Wee, whose team had an opening. And long story short, the next chapter of my career where I got to viz full-time was at Discover. It turned out that visiting full-time also involved a lot of SQL coding in that particular environment. So I got to add that tool to my skill set. And then dipped my toe into consulting earlier this year, quickly realized it was not for me, and have landed very happily in the world of government contracting, where I feel like the nonprofit management background can tie together with the data chops, the data wrangling chops that I developed at Discover, and the visualization skills to really kind of tackle a big question that has a meaningful answer that will, I get to sit in meetings where we debate whether things go in one cost bucket or not based on whether or not the software is going to be used on Earth or in outer space. So that's pretty fun.
Very cool.
The long version is much, much more rambling and sort of like, well, this thing happened, that thing happened, this thing happened, then this thing happened, you know, it all hang together in retrospect, but it's sort of foreshadowing and was unfortunately not nearly as linear as I would have been comfortable with. I've always
long and winding road. Yeah.
Sort of like straight lined to a thing that they knew they wanted to do and how it was going to be implemented. That was not my experience, but I've had a lot of joy and made a lot of friends along the way. The question, I'd love to learn how you explain the windy road to interviewers. I don't.
Oh.
They get the version. Or they get, you know, after, you know how once you've seen a movie, if you watch it again, you kind of get the little hints of how the plot is going to unfold. So there are themes that run through all of this, and I pick up on the themes and that are very cohesive and less on the random string of activities that gave rise to the themes. So
pick up on the
thanks for the question, Steph.
Yeah. Ginny?
So I think there's a lot of similarities between my story and the others that we're hearing today. So I went to college thinking I was going to major in psychology. And then I realized I absolutely hated psychology. And I was getting terrible grades too, because I didn't want to read about it. Didn't want to do any of the work. And then one of my friends got me to take an anthropology elective with her. Discovered I absolutely loved anthropology and changed my major. And then realized it was not going to be as easy as I thought to find a job that used my education. So I worked at Barnes & Noble, which I had been doing since I graduated high school. I worked at Barnes & Noble and in the cafe as a barista all the way from the end of high school until the end of grad school. So I transferred from one store here in North Carolina to a store out in New Mexico where I went to grad school and then got my master's again in anthropology, because if it's hard to find a job with a bachelor's in anthropology, I thought it'd be easier to find a job with a master's in anthropology. And my focus when I got my master's degree was food studies. So I did food studies in anthropology, and I studied wine and the wine culture and the wine in New Mexico. And then when I moved back to North Carolina after I finished, that degree, I got a job at Total Wine because it was the middle of the recession. Yet again, there were no jobs. I wanted to be an anthropology professor, but I didn't want to get a PhD. So I ended up getting a job as an adjunct professor. I would teach part-time, and that didn't pay the bills. So my dad came across an ad in the newspaper, if that dates me just a little bit, an ad in the newspaper for an institutional researcher at the local community college. So I had no idea what that was. I read the description of the job. I was like, well, I did surveys. I know how to do surveys. That was part of my anthropology education. So I'll give it a shot. So I go in and they asked me about running an ANOVA. It was like one of the interview questions. And I was like, oh my God, that's going way back to my undergrad psychology classes, which I hated. And so I was like, yeah, never, I don't know how to do that. So I thought I blew that interview. I thought I would never hear from them again. I was not getting that job. And then I did. And I don't know how, except that my boss was also an anthropology major. And in that job, I never once had to run an ANOVA. So I don't even know why they asked that during the interview. So the moral of that story is, even if you don't have the answer you think they want to hear in the interview, it could still work out. So I worked there for a couple of years, and that's where I found out about Tableau. So my boss came across it one day and she's like, I don't have time to learn this. You learn this. And then you tell me if we're going to buy it. And that was back in 2012. And it was still kind of new. I think it was maybe version 7, maybe 8. I don't know. But I tried it. I loved it. And then that's all I wanted to do. And that wasn't all I had to do because work was a lot more than that. I was doing a lot of survey work. And so after a couple of years there, I decided it was time for me to move up. I wanted more of a challenge. And so I applied for a job at a different institution, and this time a 4-year college instead of a 2-year college, and got that job. And that college did not use Tableau. I was kind of devastated that I was going to have to leave all that behind. So then my boss at the new job, she gave me the chance to pitch Tableau to her and convince them that they needed it in their institutional research office. And so I spent a lot of time putting together some demo dashboards on Tableau Public, and then convinced her, yeah, we needed that. So we got it. And then this is part of the UNC system. So there are 17 schools that make up the UNC system of universities. And then the system as a whole decided they're going to get Tableau too. So that was great. And I was selected to be a board member for the North Carolina Association of Institutional Research Board. And it was at a board meeting for that I met the person who is now my wonderful boss. And he and I were sitting there after the meeting was over, just chatting. I was telling him about Tableau and some ideas that I had. And I wanted to create this kind of day where people from all of our universities could get together and just show what we're working on, because it was still such a new product within the system. And there weren't a lot of people that knew a lot about Tableau. I was one of the people who had been using it the longest. And I didn't know everything. I was completely self-taught. I had no data in my background, except for that little smidgen of psychology. So he and I got to chatting. We thought, why don't we collaborate and put together a day, invite people from all the universities, and we'll just sit in a room and we'll talk about dashboards. And thus Analytics Day was born. And if you're in higher ed, you might have heard of it. Analytics Day has been going on since 2018. So we're 6 years in, and it is one day virtual mini conference where now people from all over the world come and show and tell their education dashboards. But the beginning, it was just like 15 people in a room showing their dashboards, and it was great, and I loved it. So after we created Analytics Day together, he kind of created this position that I'm in, and I applied for it and got it. And the rest, I guess, is history.
Wow, very cool. Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, I have a bachelor of science in chemistry, and after getting my bachelor, I worked in a interdisciplinary chemistry lab for 3 years, where I was a molecular biologist that literally cultivating genetically modified bacteria, get some special protein out of them, and use them for subsequent experiments. But after that 3 years, I realizing that I was reek of the smell of the solutions that I've been brewing every day, working in the lab in the weekend, typhoon nights, 2 a.m. It wasn't the life that I envisioned. I still love the science part, especially the analytics part. So guess what? I doubled down and let's get a PhD. So I flew to the United States, started my PhD journey, but this time I knew that I would not want to be a wet lab chemist. So I explored different topics, and I landed up in a lab where they study how a scientific visualization was developed. And I got a chance, I joined the lab, and I had a chance to collaborate with Harvard Medical School and University of Toronto and UC Davis, where they produce a 5-minute animation explaining a specific scientific concepts, and I get to evaluate its value in education and information communication. Love it, took the chance, had no idea how to analyze that animation whatsoever. After 3 years of course and then gathering data, I got a lot of data from the animation content design, how the target student audience, what they know after watching the animation. I got a lot of information about the designer, the whole creation process. All of this data, I was overwhelmed by it. I was looking for different ways and different methods that are not Excel and not coding to analyze these data. Eventually, I bumped into a professor in a visualization conference, and then she told me that, oh, by the way, we're having a graduate level course in the future semester, if you're interested. And then she signed me up for the course, and then in the course, there were free Tableau training curriculum. That was just one of the many software introduced in that course. So I took the course in early 2019. And then within a couple of months, I learned how to generate some non-conventional small multiple charts. And I just fell in love in the analytics part. Turned out you can do analytics without hardcore coding or without keep on using Excel as your only tool. Fell in love with it. And then the pandemic hit. I saw a lot of not so glamorous side of academia. It just made me realize that, yes, I don't want to stay in academia. And also I was in credit card debt. In the last year of my PhD, I decided, I attended the Tableau conference-ish, and then someone kept on convincing me that, oh, if you want to look for a job in the industry, you need to have a Tableau public account. You need to, just do Makeover Monday challenge. Just do it. Like, don't think about it. Just do it. So I decided to give it a try. And then after several rounds, I realized that I was actually good in this thing, like data analytics and Tableau. And then back then, Makeover Monday, they would, look at all of the submitted visualizations, and they would select a couple of favorites of the weeks. And my visit started to get selected in this, global submitting challenge. So I realized that, okay, maybe I'm more than good. Maybe I'm, better than I thought. And meanwhile, I was approaching the end of my PhD. I was about to defense. Right within a month of my defense date, someone reached out to me on a data visualization Slack channel. He's like, oh, by the way, I'm also Kevin. I'm also from Purdue. I was also in the chemistry department. You're very interesting, like the visualization that you're doing. Let's connect and talk. We communicated, we connected, we chat, coffee chat for 3 hours. He's from Discover, and then by the end of that conversation, he learned that, oh, I want to transit out of academia and everything. He asked, we may have a job opening if you are interested. We know that credit card is not your thing, but we're doing a lot of analytics and we're using Tableau a lot. So I landed in the job. Now I'm 1 month short of my 3-year anniversary. So that's it. That's the curve. Yeah, step out of academia and into credit card.
Thank you. And the chat has me smiling. Like Kyle said, only Kevin could say, let's slow down and get a PhD. So
that's the most Asian stereotypical way to handle a stress.
Yeah. We've talked a bit about how you found the career path that's right for you, and how you got into a data career. Maybe it would be to get into some of the advice you have for attendees, the advice for identifying your transferable skills and conveying your strengths that you gained across your experience of the long and winding road of your career path.
Do you want me to go first again, Sarah?
That'd be great. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, I think, some of the things that we've already touched on that I just want to maybe reiterate is, I think, at least for me, a lot of, my career path has been understanding what interests me and doing that self-reflection, but also, thinking about, okay, when you do get into that position that you're kind of seeking, does it line up with what you were hoping it was going to be? And if not, then, continuing to explore. So I think that there's nothing wrong with trying a lot of different things and finding what you like and what you don't like. It's kind of a bit of, at least for me, it was trial and error. I do think, understanding not only kind of what your interests are, but also like, what are you good at and what will pay the bills. And I think finding that intersection of where all of those things kind of come together is really ideal. And I think what's really cool about the data space, the whole, data career field is that there's so many different types of jobs, right? You can do data entry, you can do data visualization, you can do data storytelling, you can do data engineering, you can do analytics engineering, machine learning engineering, data science, like it. And that's only like the things that I can rattle off right now. Some of those require technical skills, some don't. So I think that there's, what I really love about the space is that there is space for everybody, and whatever your interests or skill set is, I think, finding where that fits. And then being able to articulate that. I think, it's really easy again, this is my opinion, but I think it's really easy to focus on technical skills. There's no shortage of content out there to learn those more technical skills, to learn Tableau, to learn Alteryx, to get the certification, to go through some boot camp, to like create some sort of project and put it out on Tableau Public or put it on GitHub. Absolutely do those things. I guess one word of warning there is there's so much technology and so many different things that you can learn. I've had to like remind myself that my goal isn't to learn everything or know everything. I think being adaptable, being curious, being able to dabble in these different things is really good, but being able to also have like a specialty or like just a deep understanding of one thing is also incredibly valuable. So it's about, again, striking that right balance. But in addition to those technical skills, I think, again, it's easy to focus on those because it's easy to know that you've obtained them. I think what's harder and probably really needed right now is the soft skills, being able to take the analysis that's been done and connect it to a business problem. So especially I think if you're like transferring, if you're like transitioning your career into data, you have a depth of knowledge, no matter what your experience has been in your life, in your education, in your previous job history, like you have knowledge there, and that domain knowledge can be applied using data as like your medium to kind of add value. So anyway, I think those soft skills are also incredibly valuable. If you're extroverted and you can make connections with people and you can excite them about what's possible with data. I mean, there's so many different ways to make an impact. And I understand that I'm rambling a little bit and maybe, when am I eventually going to come to like advice? But I just think that there's so many different ways to add value. I think when it comes to maybe identifying these skills that you might have, I think part of it is that self-reflection. What do you love to do? How can that add value to an organization? And then how are you communicating that value, right? So sometimes I think it's really helpful to talk with other people. And part of that is so that you can kind of learn maybe where they fit in the field of data, and then where you fit by comparison, and being able to just articulate how you are unique and how you will add value in whatever role you're taking on. So I think kind of having that self-reflection and talking with people, whether it's in a small group or even networking, I think is really helpful. And being able to tell that story. I think one thing that kind of sticks with me or has stuck with me is if you've ever built a resume or had to update your resume, and you have those bullet points listed under like a job role, and those bullet points, they should be kind of like action oriented, and they should have like metrics associated with them if possible. Like that's almost the way to like think about, you know, how can you synthesize the value that you've had? How can you articulate your impact? It is almost like, I think that's just a really good, at least for me, like a really good concept to maybe apply even outside of a resume. Like how can you deliver on like very succinct, actionable, quantifiable value. So yeah, hopefully there's some nuggets of wisdom somewhere in there,
For sure.
but
Yeah.
that's kind of like the brain dump, I suppose, of you know, how you can identify those strengths.
Thank you. Whoever wants to jump in next.
I'll build on that and say that in terms of the question, advice for identifying your strengths, I've noticed that a lot of people, especially earlier in their career, your biggest strength is something that you take for granted. You are so good at it that you don't understand that it's a skill. So the way to go looking for that is think about something that really irritates you when people do it wrong, because it is so obvious to you the right way to do it and that they are completely screwing it up. And that is the hint of like, no, this is something you're really good at, that you're so good at it that it's just like something that you take for granted. And it's, yeah, like a fish getting out of water is a superpower. Yeah. So I think look for the things that irritate you to see what your sort of like hidden natural strengths might be. And then look for the things in your job that you enjoy. Like if you had the chance to take a break from your job for 3 months, and then you came back to your job and you only had to do the parts of it that you liked, what would you keep and what would you get rid of? I had the opportunity to do this when I was in prospect research. My 3-month professional break was maternity leave. And it turned out that my team had enough excess capacity. I had just started learning Tableau before I left. My team kind of absorbed all of my day-to-day. I came back part-time for a few months and was like, they were like, we don't want to get like bog you down in the weeds. You're only here half the week. Let's just put you on project work where you can finally like get at some of these wish list items. I never picked up my day-to-day again. So that was a pretty cool opportunity to use what's often seen as something that can set back your career as a way to transition it into the next step. But I think whether or not you're about to be a parent, and whether or not you have the opportunity to step back from your professional work for a few months, the thought exercise of like, what if I could give away half of my job? What would I keep and what would I do next is a good way to think about where you would want to go with your next position. And then transferable skills, identifying your strengths. You can always do, I love data, including, work data. So there are things out there like Strengths Finder, and various assessments that you can do that give you insight into how you fit into a business environment. And I'll echo the do what you love, but don't try to make your hobbies your careers. One of the steps that I left out of my winding path is that while I was a barista, I was also an Etsy business owner, and I sold speaking of like niche down to succeed, I sold hand woven liturgical vestments to ministers because that was the product where I could like these beautiful woven things. They were like 3 inches wide by 8 feet long, but that was the thing that you could charge a premium for. So I just did that thing, and then after a while, like, I put my loom away. I haven't used it in years. But when I picked up sewing as a hobby, people were like, you could sell on Etsy. And I'm like, I have no interest in getting into the global clothing market. So it's okay to have your hobbies be your hobbies. I spent a while thinking I wanted to be an outdoor educator or a guide or what have you. And then I realized that, like, I am terrible at making small talk with an endless stream of strangers. Like, one of the things that I love about the Tableau public community is that you viz what you love. So you get to know people, their hobbies, their passions. You kind of put yourself out there as your authentic self, and you're like, this is who I am. This is all the weird stuff I'm into. And people find it. And the people who resonate with that reach out to you. And then suddenly you have friends around the world who are interested in getting to know the real you. I'm not good at synthesizing my thoughts off the top of my head. I ramble. I'm real great at listening and distilling down other people's thoughts into a couple short sentences. So know your strengths, know your weaknesses, figure out what parts of your work you enjoy the most. Don't try to confuse your hobbies with your career. And look for the things that really irritate you that you almost can't not solve. And those are good ways to move forward towards success.
I love that.
I think.
Yeah. And I never thought of it that way with the things that irritate me. Kevin?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh yeah, I don't have much to add into what Brandi and Elisa has been saying. It's been great, very precise. The only thing that I like to add is you may think back and see what kind of favors people always ask you of. My friends always ask me, when I was a graduate student, my friends always asked me to fix their slides when it comes to a lot of data on it, fix the layout of their writing poster and something like that. I'm the person, like I don't know how I got this, but my superpower might be if I look at a slide or a dashboard, I can tell you that the hex code of that blue shade's wrong. Like, I don't know why other people cannot, but it's very obvious to me. And so things like that, when things not align, even by 2 pixels, I sensed it, like some part of my bone, it's feeling a chill. So, and my friends told me that, like, some things like that, it's just something that they look for when they look for my help. So maybe looking back to see what kind of favors you've been granting for free, maybe you can grant them with money. Yeah. Cool. Short.
Thank you.
Yeah. Jeannie, do you have anything to add on this topic?
I can add something. It might already be starting to get into the next question a little bit, but one thing that I did when I was going through my 12 years of retail, customer service, food service, and thinking the whole time, this is not what I want to be doing. This is not what I'm meant to do with my life. This is not the career I dreamed of. I could have just gone to work every day and done the bare minimum and just gotten by, cash my paycheck, and move on with my life. But instead, I really tried to make it worth my time, because I was spending a lot of time there, and learn something from every job. So I would volunteer for the things that other people didn't want to do, like inventory, ordering, and I don't know, just anything that nobody else wanted to do, I would volunteer and do it. And I think because I did that, I moved up in every job I had. I went from being a barista to being a cafe supervisor. When I worked the dining hall at summer camp, I went from being just a dining hall worker to being a manager the next year. When I worked at Total Wine, I went from being just your regular wine consultant to being a key holder and somebody who does all of the order, all the order processing. And because I was willing to do those things, I learned things that other people didn't get a chance to learn. And those are things that while they might not be in that job description of what they're looking for, I still feel that I gleaned some skills that I was able to apply in my job now. I forget who was saying it in the chat earlier, but working customer service, it might have been Kevin, you do learn to keep a smile on your face, even when people are asking you to do things that you don't want to do and that you might be seething on the inside, but you know you have to put your best face forward. So even things like that.
Yeah, data viz is customer service to an extent that people don't realize until you get into it, because especially when you're at the level where you're specializing in creating the visualizations or designing the data to create the visualizations, you're solving someone else's business problem, whether that's an internal customer or an external customer or someone else on your team. So being able to communicate with someone and get it right or resolve differences when you inevitably aren't exactly on the same page the first time. You know, like in Starbucks, we had this concept of customer recovery, and it doesn't matter if you get it wrong the first time if you do a good job making it right. And understanding that everyone that you walks into the store is someone who needs more coffee than they have already had. You know, developing that empathy for your customer. People aren't going to come to us with data questions if they're easy. They're going to come with something that they've been trying to fix for a while, or that they know that there's more here than they're really being able to wrap their mind around. Or, you know, maybe somebody 3 levels up has said, hey, I need this question answered. And they're like, so there's a lot on the line. You know, like data is people, and we work with people doing data. So customer service, yeah, absolutely. Lean on those skills all the time. Very transferable.
I hadn't thought of it that way, but that's a really good point. I want to make sure we have time for talking about like pride at work and advice for that. Ginny, you'd mentioned the question about experience too. Sometimes it's difficult to get a job when you have limited experience. You need experience to get a job, but getting the job is the experience you're looking for. So any advice? Was this the question you were thinking of? Okay.
Yes.
Any advice for getting experience and establishing your qualifications for the job market?
So do you mind if I go first? Because I have a hard drop in 1 o'clock.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. To get experience, depending on your scale, if your the experience that you want is to wrangle data or visualization or dashboard designs, all of this can be done with the community projects. A lot of people didn't realize that, but Tableau Public is not just for people to post fancy visits. If you click the Learn tab on the top left and go find community projects, you will find unlimited number of data sets that you can use it to write SQL code. You can use it to test Tableau prep. You can use it to do sketching, wireframing, dashboard designs. After doing all of those things, you just need to make sure that you have a platform to share it. share your progress. It could be a website that you pay for. It could be a free WordPress website or free Tableau public profile. So even if no one's giving you an experience, you can always rely on the DataFam community resources that if you reach out to any one of us, we are more than happy to talk your ears off on how to gain an experience without an employment. So that's it. Cool. And with that, I just want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this talk. I'm going to drop a little bit early, but it's been a great opportunity to connect again. I'll definitely reach out real soon. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, just to maybe add on to what Kevin was talking about with Tableau Public, I mean, I agree. I think a lot of my early experience that I was able to demonstrate came, I mean, thankfully, I think there were opportunities in whatever job I had to, at least practice my data skills. And, I think it feels bad to maybe call it to like spin my experience into like data experience, but that is a bit of like what it is. You might have been hired for one job and it has like this list of responsibilities, but if you can pick out the nuggets that are in there and just speak to those and say, in this role that I've had, these are some projects or things that I've worked on where I've demonstrated my data skills. I think that's incredibly valuable. Of course, I think there's so many opportunities to learn, whether it's through boot camps or just, people's websites or, Tableau Public, thankfully, is free, and you can just kind of learn that. And I think when you do that kind of on the side, in addition to whatever job you have, I think working on things that are really interesting to you obviously is helpful. But then too, I would say for anybody who's maybe a student, whether you're in high school or college or maybe doing continuing education or a master's program or something. So much of my coursework from like when I did my master's degree is out on GitHub. So like, I just think there's a lot of opportunities to just pull from whatever you've had the opportunity to get involved with and showcase that. I think is helpful. So I know, Kevin obviously talked about Tableau Public. There's GitHub, but also just posting your lessons or like the things that you've learned along the way, either on like a blog or LinkedIn or like Substack or something, is also incredibly valuable. Just somewhere that like potential employers can go and look and see how you think, what are some of the things that you've been able to accomplish. And just the fact that you're kind of trying, I think is also it's like an incredible skill. I mean, one last thing I'll say is, as a hiring manager, when I hire people, I don't really care whether you know Tableau or Power BI or some other tool, Click, for example. I care about your curiosity to learn, because if you have that, you can pick up whatever tool we're using. And I mean, for better or worse, data and technology is constantly changing. So that ability to learn new things is really important. And so that's really what I hire for. So if you can demonstrate that, I think so many hiring managers would be interested. So
thinking back to Ginny's example with the stats, like like it was a flashback to undergrad, but it was about it wasn't just about the technical. So Elisa?
Yeah. So I'm going to put in a plug here for a community project that I lead with Eric Balash and Shreya Arya called Back to Viz Basics, which is a bi-weekly beginner-friendly all levels project that is based around practicing and demonstrating that you've mastered data visualization fundamentals. We drop really approachable data sets and we work really hard to keep them timely and relevant. So often participants from Back to Viz Basics are featured from Viz of the Day. And so that's a great way to get that sort of initial recognition. I think as a candidate for a data visualization job, you can very easily de-risk the hiring manager's decision by showing them that you know what you talk about, that you can actually do the job that they need done. And you can do that by building a portfolio. There's other ways to do it too. Like if you've got but this is specifically talking about if you don't have the experience and you want people to be able feel comfortable taking a risk on you, you can invest, I think as little as 4, maybe 8 visits, just start filling up those first couple lines of a portfolio to show that you can take a data set and you can turn it into something that is digestible. It's an insight. You not only know how to make the charts, but you know how to make the charts in a way that somebody who's looking at the question for the first time would be able to take some insights away from. It's not a huge time commitment, and it's hugely valuable. And a lot of times we see people, like, I can promise you, anyone who does Back to Viz Basics consistently, their skills improve by leaps and bounds because, like, practice makes perfect. Like, perfect practice is great, but like just kind of coming to something, looking at it, doing what you can in 2 weeks. I started out as a participant in Back to Viz Basics. It was just getting going. But I knew that I needed to build a portfolio so that I could demonstrate this skill set because, I'd worked with one data set, the internal fundraising data, and I didn't really know how to create dummy data at that point. So I couldn't show what I'd come up with for work. But I wanted to do more of this in my next job. So I started building a public portfolio, and it got to the point where, like, no one has hired me without looking at my portfolio in years. And I'm often applying formally to roles after I have had initial conversations with hiring managers because I've put myself out there as somebody who's learned and talked about their learning, and as somebody who has a body of work. People can look at what I've done and say, okay, yeah, this, like, lightning strikes more than once here. And my portfolio, like, I'm not growing it as quickly as I used to. So it doesn't have to be forever. You're not committing to, becoming the next person who has 100 vises on their portfolio. But if you can sit down and consistently practice for even 6 months, I think 1, you'll get much more comfortable with the tool. 2, you kind of like join a community of practice. If you're posting and putting your work out there, like Brandi said, on LinkedIn or the platform formerly known as Twitter, or wherever you're finding people, you kind of start to get to know people who are at your stage in their data viz journey, and you catch the eye of people who are one step further. To the extent where you have the financial freedom to invest in yourself. I did Chantilly Jaggernaut's Millennials in Data Bootcamp because I needed some structure around starting to build my portfolio. And she made us turn in our homework on Tableau Public. So kind of forcing yourself to put yourself out there, whether or not you thought it was good enough, whether or not you thought it was done. I'm taking the Flairledge Twins Advanced Tableau Bootcamp that's starting in a few weeks because, like, I'm never going to be able to sit down and make myself learn all of the fancy stuff you can do with map layers. And I've been around advanced Tableau techniques long enough that I understand what's possible. And I want to be able to pull it off myself. So, those are things that I put on credit cards and paid down over time. But my salary from, being an entry-level fundraising person to being, like, now I think I'm officially like data scientist 3. The investments have more than paid off, and I like what I do a lot more. So you get experience by getting experience, and it doesn't have to be paid. And then talking about the experience in a way that makes you sound like you would be a good fit for the job. And I would say also in terms of hiring, I have been grateful for every job I haven't gotten, because when you've been on the other side of the table, and I haven't done that much of this, but Brandi, maybe you can speak to this sometime a little bit more. You don't want somebody who's not going to be a good fit for the role. And so, somebody could really be a great person that you would love to work with, and they are an amazing wrench, and you happen to need a screwdriver right now. So the more you can put yourself out there is like, hey, I am a great screwdriver. And then just don't get discouraged if you're interviewing for something that turns out to be a job for a wrench. So figure out what you're good at, develop things that you're interested in, and and keep trying. Like, I know it gets super discouraging.
Yeah.
But, find your community of fellow learners and be each other's cheerleaders. And next thing you know, like, at least for me, I was like, oh, next thing I know, all of my friends are Tableau ambassadors.
Yeah.
And some of them are starting to be visionaries, and they're building their own teams. And like, is this how networking works?
Yeah. No, and I think that's such a good, one thing that as you're talking, it just makes me think about, like, for any role, there's like multiple people applying, but they can only usually hire one person, so I agree. I would just second, like, don't get discouraged. And I think too, when interviewing, obviously every situation is different. We all need to work, but I think more and more, right? You're interviewing that company just as much as they're interviewing you. But I think many of us too, it seems like have articulated the fact that we've actually gotten opportunities, whether internally or either at other companies, through networking. And so I just, want to plug Tableau user groups, like, such a good way to get introduced to different companies in your area, especially, like, I think networking is so important to do early and often, because you don't want to wait until you need your network to start building it. So you need to start building it early. And I would say too, like, you can have user groups in person, but you can also be pretty active on, like, LinkedIn and X. So anyway, just chat with people. You never know where your next job or a future job might come from. And just seeing how other people that in the community, how their careers have progressed over time is also just really cool to see. And you never know, it could be 10 years before your paths collide, but it could be in a really big way. So you never know.
Thank you. Ginny, did you have anything to add?
Not really. The only thing I wish I could do differently, if I could go back in time, would be to get an internship when I was in college. But I didn't feel like I could do that because I needed to make money. But there were probably paid internships available if I had just looked. But yeah, that's the only thing I think I would do differently.
I also didn't do internships during college because I was just so burnt out by the time it got to the end of the semester. I didn't know nearly as much about pacing myself and working the way that I needed to. And to be fair, academia is not built for that. But I did do some internships after I graduated from college. And if you're thinking about doing advanced degrees, people also look for internships during summers for people who are doing master's programs. And an internship is a great way to get a feel for if the company culture is going to be right for you.
Yeah.
I also didn't realize while I was doing my master's degree that people who were coming to campus because they like the type of student that typically comes out of that program. Like they're coming to campus because they want to hire someone. And I think somebody even told me that, but I didn't go to all of the meet and greets. So go to meet and greets. Like if you still have access to that kind of thing, go to the meet and greets, talk to the people, think about like, is this somebody that I would want to see on a Monday morning 8 a.m. Zoom call every week?
Some of the things that you all touched on had to do with like the work environment. Like Brandi said, that you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, and so any advice for getting a feel for if it's going to be a welcoming and encouraging work environment, and because we're short on time, when you're in that work environment, any advice for navigating that as a member of the LGBTQ community, and how allies can help create a supportive environment as well. So, yeah.
Ginny, do you want to go first? Not to put you on the spot, but want to give you the opportunity.
I can. One thing that I have done, all the jobs I've worked in, there's only been one job where I did not feel like I could be myself and I could be honest about my sexuality and my lifestyle on the job. And after that, I said, never again, not going back ever again. So now, one thing I do in the interview process, and this may not work for everybody, but I find a way to somehow work into one of my answers, the phrase "my wife," because I want to see how other people around the table react. And I've been lucky because a lot of the times I've worked in higher ed in North Carolina. I've already met the people I'm going to be working with at a conference. I already kind of know them. I already know the culture of the institution where I'm considering going to work. So I already had an idea ahead of time that it was going to be a welcoming and comfortable work environment. But in case it wasn't, just kind of feeling it out that way through the interview process. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's, of course, really good. I think when I'm interested in a company, I always love to read the stuff that they have at the bottom of the job posting, where they, either talk or don't talk about, their policies and equal opportunity and just kind of their vibe. I usually scope out the website for the company as well. I mean, not only am I passionate about LGBTQ plus rights, but also sustainability. So I'm looking for companies that match my values, and I want to work for a place that is proud about that. And if they have any sort of DEI efforts, like they should be posting that on their website or on their LinkedIn or something like that. So I do a little bit of digging on that. But then I guess just in the same vein, I guess I personally just tend to have a mindset where I don't care about your opinion of me. And I think I understand that not everybody is in that position. So for me, I guess I do my due diligence, and I want to work for a company that allows me to just, I can talk about my life the same way that everybody talks about theirs. But I think more importantly for me, when I'm in that position or I'm in a company, I do everything I can to make a safe space for other people. So there are multiple opportunities, multiple times that I can recall where I've, been very clear about, my wife, and especially around people that maybe I thought might be also part of the community, and making a space for them to feel like they can share that with me. And so I guess for allies, I would say using gender neutral terminology and not making those assumptions or doing anything to kind of indicate your allyship definitely creates space for people who are part of the community to one, either be themselves or at least know that you're somebody that they can be themselves around.
Yeah. So I'll jump in, and I don't have if you're not dating someone, or if you're not partnered, or if you fall under the B or Q area of the LGBTQ umbrella, you might not be able to name drop a partner or, my wife or that kind of thing. So, and I've been in that situation. I put myself under the B/Q umbrella and have had male partners. So, you're kind of in this position of do I out myself? It's not a situation I wouldn't talk about, people that I'm not sleeping with right now in any other professional context. So I think it's the same kind of looking at the websites and getting the vibe for the culture. Do they post about pride if it's a bigger company? Do they seem to mean it when they post about pride? There's a lot of overlap between the queer community and the neurodiverse community. So what do they do to support people who are ADHD or autistic? Is there any sort of initiative around that? Just looking for, in general, signs that it's okay to be who you are. And we need to get a job done at the end of the day. But are you supposed to look one way to sort of fit in with this culture? Or is there, we see that you are an individual, and to the extent possible, we value your skill set, and we will figure out a way to put your skill set to work for the mission. Some companies are good at this, some people aren't. And HRC, Human Rights Commission, also puts out an annual ranking of LGBTQ friendly companies. It's mostly the larger ones, but they do all of the Fortune 500, and then anybody who filled out the survey who is smaller than that. So if the company that you're interested in happens to be on that list, that can be a good way to figure out their sort of reputation for being queer friendly or not. For me, one of the main ways that I stay kind of out in the community is by participating in this tug. I've been a speaker since the very first session. As a Viz Basics co-lead, I make sure that we do at least one Pride data set per year. And I work with Sarah and Lawrence and next year Kyle to make sure that it's not a data set about how much it sucks to be gay most of the time in most of the world, that it's something that is uplifting the positive aspects of the queer community that we've collectively developed under, sometimes I feel maybe the kids today have it a little easier than we did, but gay was a word that meant stupid in the 90s, and people would say that's so gay, and you would have to decide whether or not to speak up about it. So I'm happy to say that English slang has fallen out of favor, but you're still looking for a place that's not the vibe. And where if it happened to come up in conversation, you would feel comfortable disclosing. So that's my 2 cents.
I relate to all of that so much, and really looking for if an organization means it. I remember with my first job after grad school, I put my pronouns in my email signature, and was on the phone with a faculty member at another organization, and who was like, "Oh, I saw in your email you have your pronouns there," and I'm like, "Yeah, it's a way of being inclusive and explaining how you want to be referred to." And they were like, "Well, I'm not LGBTQ, but could I do that too? Because my name's Robin, and people always like misgender me in email." It's like,
Yes.
yeah, you absolutely can. Like, so inclusion for the community creates a more inclusive space for everyone to be treated how they to be included, and to be treated with respect. And yeah, so sometimes the little things like that are big things, so anything else anyone would like to add? Any advice or anything you've learned along the way?
I think the biggest thing for me is you don't really know the impact that you're having on people. I mean, it's great that we've been able to have pretty direct conversations, both here, but maybe with individuals in our organizations. But there's so many other people that you don't even realize are maybe like watching what you do, how you do it, maybe how inclusive you are. So I think all of those things are really, it's pretty powerful, and you might not even realize your impact. So I always keep that in mind.
Absolutely. All right. Is there anything else from anyone?
Yeah, I'll say, if you're watching this from an ally perspective, my favorite, so I had an experience with a new manager who had seen me do a Pride panel and had texted me, and they were like, "Congratulations, I'm so supportive." We didn't know each other very well at that point. And then later, I mentioned my husband, and he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were gay." And I was like, "No, it's okay. I am." And he kind of backtracked. But I think be the kind of ally where people might accidentally assume that you're queer. And then if they do, be okay with that. My favorite one, the Lady Gaga interview from a few years back, where there was a lot of speculation going around on whether she was trans, and somebody was like, what's this, what do you have to say about all of these people who think that you, I don't think the phrase that you have male genitalia, and she was like, "So what if I did?" I don't care. My fans don't care. Why are we talking about this and not my music? So I think especially in any group of people, keeping in mind that at least 10% of people in any given room, on average statistically, are members of the LGBTQ plus community. They might not be out to you. They might never come out to you, but behaving in such a way that people might mistake you for gay if you're an ally, or, just people have all sorts of reasons for sharing information or not sharing information about their personal lives. So just being inclusive, whether or not you think you need to.
Yeah.
No
matter who's in the room. No
matter who's in the room.
Mm-hmm. Just that unwavering support.
Right.
Yeah.
What's the saying that's something like it's doing the right thing even when nobody's watching, or in this case, I guess, even if you don't know who's watching or who sees you? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You never know when it might matter. And then acknowledging that sometimes you have to take jobs that you don't really want because you need them, and you might not always have the ability to be out. But having grown up in an area where I was semi-closeted, having taken, so a bit that we didn't mention that doesn't come up very often is I actually almost joined the Marines when I was in college, and it was during the Don't Ask, Don't Tell era. So I literally signed Don't Ask, Don't Tell paperwork. It felt real shitty. I washed out. I had an injury, an old injury that flared up, and I'm grateful for people that is a good career path. I'm grateful that it wasn't one that I got any further down. But like, to the extent that you can, be your authentic self. Find a way to be who you are, because then you don't have this like clenching fear of what if people find out and don't like me. Like, you can find people who like you for who you are and who value the skill sets that you bring to the table. Like, keep it up.
I love that.
Looking, and hopefully you'll land in the right place. And I've found the DataViz community to be very welcoming. I don't know what everyone else's experience has been.
Absolutely.
But we're all, I think in our hearts, even those of us who are good at talking to people, we're a bunch of nerds and weirdos. I think Christina Gorgia said, I don't think people who come to the Tableau conference were necessarily the people who were popular in high school. Sort of like, we've created this community of loving to get down into the details and, share our insights and be helpful and be open and be vulnerable. So this is a pretty good community to take a chance.
Awesome. Well, we are a little bit after 2:30, so we want to be respectful of everybody's time. And to our panelists, including Kevin, who had to drop, thank you so much for being here with us today, for sharing your perspectives and your advice and your stories and your winding roads and all of it. I loved hearing all of it. I hope everyone in the audience enjoyed it just as much. We really appreciate your time. It's great to see all of you. And so from Sarah, Lawrence, and I, thank you so much for attending this DataPride meeting today. Great to see everybody. We'll make the recording available on the socials as soon as we can. And everybody have a wonderful rest of your Thursday. And if you're in the US, hopefully you get to enjoy a long weekend coming up.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Have a good one.